Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we will be discussing JSON policies, providing you with an overview of what they are and exploring their basic structure. Access in AWS is managed by creating policies and attaching them to an IAM user, groups, or roles which are IAM identities. You can also assign to an AWS resource, for example, an S3 bucket. Now, a policy is an entity that, when attached to an identity or resource, defines their permissions. AWS evaluates these policies when an IAM principal makes a request. IAM policies define permissions for actions, no matter how you choose to perform them. Let me break it down for you with an example. If a policy allows something like the get user action, that means a user with that policy can get user information through different methods, whether it's through the AWS Management Console, the AWS CLI, or the API. So when you create an IAM user, you have got options. You can decide to allow console access, which means the user can sign into the AWS Management Console using their credentials, or you can give a programmatic access, allowing them to access the CLI or API by using the access keys. AWS supports 6 types of policies: identity-based policies, resource-based policies, permission boundaries, organizations SCPs, access control list, and session policies. Identity-based policies and the policies used to set permission boundaries are JSON policy documents that you attach to a user or a role. Resource-based policies are JSON policy documents that you attach to a resource, for example, an S3 bucket. ACLs are also attached to a resource, but you must use a different syntax. SCPs are JSON policy documents with restricted syntax that you attach to an AWS organizational unit, OU. And finally, session policies are JSON policies that you provide when you assume a role or federated user session. When you create or edit a JSON policy, IAM can perform policy validation to help you create an effective policy. As illustrated in the following figure, a JSON policy document includes these elements: optional policy-wide information at the top of the document, one or more individual statements. Each statement includes information about a single permission. If a policy includes multiple statements, AWS applies a logical OR across the statements when evaluating them. Now let's understand the policy elements. First up, we have the version. So this is where you specify the version of the policy language you wanted to use. The version policy element specifies the language syntax rules that are to be used to process a policy. To use all the available policy features, include this latest version element. Then we have got the statement. Think of it as a container for all the policy's main elements. You can include more than one statement in a policy. Now let's talk about SID. SID stands for statement ID, and it helps you to differentiate between different statements. The effect is a crucial one. You can use it to indicate whether a policy is allowed or denied. It is like an yes or no for your permissions. We have a principal, which is required in some cases. This element specifies who the policy applies to. We also have action. So this is where you list all the actions that your policy either allows or denies. Now let's talk about the resources your policy applies to. If you're crafting an IAM permission policy, you will need to specify a list of resources that the actions apply to. But if you are working on a resource-based policy, this part is optional. Lastly, your policy grants permissions only under, um, you know, specific circumstances, basically on conditions. So it is not necessary for you to understand the JSON syntax. You can use a visual editor in the AWS management console to create and edit customer managed policies without ever using JSON. However, if you use inline policies for groups or complex policies, you must still create and edit these policies in the JSON editor using the console. Summarizing, in this video, we have covered what an IAM policy is, the types of policies supported by AWS, the policy structure, and its elements. Thank you.